As a country, one of the greatest things we have that separates us from other countries is our First Amendment right to free speech. Though we've had this amendment in play roughly 250 years, dating all the way back to 1789, there's been a rising questions as to what speech is acceptable and what speech is considered not acceptable, more particularly free speech not being associated with hate speech basically not being free speech. We're a society composed of all different types of race, backgrounds, religious views. And as a society, we're expected to come together and resolve any problems that we have, settle disagreements in a constructive manner, and also come to a consensus in a good constructive manner as well.
Harass me. What will it take for it to be hate speech? And when do I actually become a victim? When I'm dead?
So at the end of this video, I'll elaborate on one of the concerning problems I see threatening free speech. But this is David Rubin elaborating on free speech and hate speech.
It's a great question. So first off, the Supreme Court has ruled that hate speech doesn't exist in that you can do basically, you can say whatever you want, short of yelling fire in a crowded theater or calling for direct violence to someone. So right now, you can say anything to me. You can literally say anything to me. I'm sure you're thinking of a couple things. And you can say whatever you want to me. And guess what? I'll survive. Oh, she's tossing in another 20? All right, we got $40 for it. What are you doing here? Do you have hobbies?
They have a First Amendment right to be here and say what they want to.
So obviously in this video, it gets pretty hot. Some people, of course, are not in agreement with David Rubin. One of the people even tell him to shut up, even though he's slated to be there and he's getting paid for being there in his speech. And of course, the young lady in the front with the microphone, she goes on to say that, well, they have a First Amendment right to be there. They can say whatever they want to. And of course, it just, I find it kind of interesting that they can say what they want to, but it's unacceptable for someone else on a different opinion level to say what they have to say. So.
Practicing my First Amendment right. I'm going to give the mic to somebody out of respect. To whoever wants to shit talk me now when I put this mic down, I just want you to know that your opinion literally means bullshit to me. And if you agree with the concept, yeah, I have a right to say it, so I'm going to say it.
So you have a right to offend them. Let me get this straight.
I can offend people when they have a personal vendetta against my character. I'm not going after people.
So you've been writing the laws of society and telling people who they can offend and who they can't.
So one of the problems that we're seeing as far as free speech versus hate speech is that there really is no real law definition of hate speech itself. Hate speech, of course, unofficially is defined as comments that are, say, racist, sexist, bigoted in nature. But there is no real law definition of hate speech. It's just an incorporation of a certain type of speech. And so the question then comes into play, when is it not considered free speech? Because a lot of people are basing hate speech solely based off how they feel. Something that is offensive to one person may not necessarily be offensive to another. So how can it be fair to take it away all in general?
I personally don't, it's on your opinion on abortion. I personally don't think that I could have an abortion just because morally I feel like for myself it wouldn't be the right choice. But how do you defend your opinion as a white, well-off, religious man? How do you defend your, telling a woman what she can do with her body?
Because evil things are still evil, even if I'm a white, well-off religious man. And good things are still good, even if I'm a white, well-off religious man.
So the second problem that I see that is associated with the attacks on free speech per se is that many people try to limit what other people can say based on their identity. So a good example would be, if you're not black, then you really can't say much about Black Lives Matter. If you're not a woman, you can't say anything about abortion. Things that people are associating identity now versus, just talking about whatever problems there may be and coming to a consensus and fixing those problems. Just because one person's identity is not similar to another doesn't mean they can't come to an agreement about a particular issue or, pushing for a policy to be in play.
What's right and wrong, because this is the nature of human reason. The nature of human reason, the nature of right and wrong, is that you and I can talk about what's right and wrong, and that I don't retreat into my identity. If we don't retreat into our identity, and our morality is now centered around that identity, morality doesn't exist at all. We break down into a society of fragmented atoms where I can't even say, you're torturing a puppy in your backyard. I have nothing to say about that. I'm not a white woman who's in the healthcare field.
So the man speaking in the video, his name is Ben Shapiro. He's basically a political conservative who speaks at different universities, rallies, etc. Just basically on certain political issues matters. And so he just goes on to elaborate in the video that a lot of people, either far left or far right, what they'll do is retreat into identity politics, basically saying that if you don't identify with the issue itself, personally, on a personal level, you can't speak on that. And though maybe people may have that opinion, it does not violate freedom of speech. That's not what the First Amendment is how it was implemented. It doesn't mean that you can elaborate only on issues that pertain to you on a personal level. In the background here, we're seeing some hot stuff right here. Hot, I'm meaning that there's a lot of tension. Obviously, this is basically leading up into what I feel is the third issue associated with the attacks on free speech, which is basically fascism. And towards the end here, I'm going to explain how that's possible and how it's definitely a consideration to see how it is being implemented more and more as the days go on.
Is protected unless it directly incites violence.
This is a public institution. It's a government entity. They have to guarantee the free speech rights of everyone, including Shapiro.
We find the leader of that group that has vowed to shut tonight's event down, who makes a startling admission.
I don't think you should speak.
But that doesn't really comport with the First Amendment.
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care.
Why not?
I don't think that's a relevant document right now.
So as we just saw in the video, the young man talking to the commentator, of course, or the interviewer, stating that, he didn't believe Ben Shapiro had a right to speak there, and that the First Amendment is not an applicable document. It's not a relevant document, which is somewhat contradicting because that document is allowing him to say what he has to say about it. As much as I would disagree with what he's saying, he still has a right to say that. And so, see, that kind of mentality, along with the behavior that we witnessed earlier in the video with, fires going off and riots and whatnot, that can be an example of fascism. Now, most people hear fascism and correlate that with Mussolini, Hitler, Nazi Germany, which is true. That was fascism at its finest. But it does not mean that the other side of the spectrum is not capable of it as well. We're seeing it within these videos and examples everywhere else we go on how people are attacking the First Amendment and stating that, hurtful things or things that maybe are offensive to certain individuals can't be said or stated because they are offensive. And that's not what the First Amendment was implicated for. It's not defending, as much as I would like, or a lot of people would prefer, people to be nicer and say nicer things. The First Amendment was not implicated to defend people's feelings. It was implemented to protect the right to say things. As long as you're not calling or pushing directly towards violence, you can say what it is that you are feeling or whatever you would want to say. And so going against that and attacking that, as we're seeing in the video, is an example of fascism. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure there's other people are on board with me when I say this, that, I would prefer to live in a society that is nicer, people that avoid saying mean things, that were respectful, and also courteous towards how other people feel. But we have to remember as well that the First Amendment is not in play to protect how we feel or to protect, offensive remarks. The First Amendment is in play for us to express exactly what we want to say, make remarks towards anything, how we want to say it, as long as we're not calling or pushing directly towards violence. And I think it's much more beneficial, in my opinion, in solving this problem, not to try to silence another point of view, but to more or less state your own point of view and see if that gets through to them, and to get others that are like-minded with you to state that point of view, and sort of come to a consensus at the end of the day. And that's the beauty of free speech. There's a price to it, but there's also a beauty of it. The price, of course, is some people may not believe what you believe, but you can state how you feel about something and try to work it out and come to a consensus versus, hearing something you don't like and just silencing it off. Because, of course, you can't get anywhere with that. People are still going to say and feel things, even though you say it's not appropriate or whatever the case may be. My name is Antoine Blake. Very much appreciate the time you took watching the video. Anyone who took the time watching the video. If you liked it, I hope one day to make another video like this again. Until then, take care.